Clausewitz's theory that the war is continuation of politics by other means might be retold, and I used to do so. I would say that the peace in Bosnia is the continuation of a war by other means, by politics. Well, it means that we have 20 years after Dayton Accords, almost 20, not 20, but 18 years after Dayton Accords have been signed and Dayton Constitution have been imposed in Bosnia, in which we do have a political war on the stage. It's not very positive for the state. It's not very positive for the citizens. That's why I used to explain the situation in Bosnia as the frozen war situation. It is something which politicians and clergy like, and citizens suffer very much. By changing politicians and changing a constitution. I think that the constitution is the first and the most important thing to be changed here, but it can't be changed with the present politicians, which leads toward the conclusion that we should change the politicians. Is the question how, when they always intimidate their voters with the pre-election parolas such as vote for us or we'll be wiped out. And the people who are fed up of war have, I would say, a proverb in those 18 years, let only not war to be again. You know, being afraid of the war which they pass through, they will accept every politics instead of war. Of course, nobody is thinking about war seriously, but they intimidate the people very efficiently. I'm not sure that we will have a very qualified data about our society at the moment. If the census has been organized almost 20 years after the ethnic cleansing and genocide in some parts, then it will not be a fair enough picture of what really happened. They will just have a proof that in these territories, that these territories are today inhabited by the one ethnic group. I actually declare myself as a Bosnian and a Hercegovinian. I have no ethno-national membership at all. It's my problem, or not. Maybe it's my adventure, who knows. But anyhow, I think that in the normal state, it should be that all citizens should consider themselves as the citizens of this state, as Bosnians and Herzegovinians. And then the second identity might be the ethno-national identity. But you know, all Americans are first Americans, and then they're talking about, I'm Afro-American, I'm American with the Chinese or Irish or whatever background. But they are all Americans. In Bosnia, nobody was working enough on this kind of identity, which I think should be the most important. Before we have this identity among majority of our inhabitants, we have a serious reason to be concerned about the future of Bosnia and Herzegovina. If majority insist on ethno-national memberships, it is always abused by those who would like Greater Serbia and Greater Croatia and maybe small Muslim state instead of Bosnia and Herzegovina. And I do think that nobody has the moral right, after over 100,000 victims, after 2.5 million of displaced persons, and after, I would say, all 4.5 million of inhabitants of Bosnia and Herzegovina who were somehow victims of the war, to split apart Bosnia and Herzegovina as the state. And there are so many of them who would like to see that Bosnia does not exist on the political stage in Europe. Republika Srpska independence is absurd. from different reasons. First of all, I deeply believe that European Union and international community, whatever it means, will never accept that and allow that. Secondly, Republika Srpska cannot exist as independent state, even if it would be possible to declare politically. But economically, it will be impossible. Their independency, under the quotations, are just a step towards making greater Serbia. It's their goal not to be independent. As well as the third entity, again under the quotations, which is a dream of some politicians in the Croatian part of Bosnia and Herzegovina, who would like to become the third entity, or one day to become a greater Croatia. So it's clear. They're all dreams. It's nothing new, but we should work to develop serious civil society and serious state which will never accept such kind of dreams of separation, not separation itself. It's clear that the Bosniaks were the worst victims in the last war in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And it's clear that they had no reserve state, under the quotations, because other two groups have had their reserve states, and that's why they behaved that way. Bosniaks had no and has no reserve state. Bosnia and Herzegovina is their state, as Yugoslavia was their state before. That's why, of course, that they are patriots who would fight for Bosnia and Herzegovina. It's clear. They lost enormous members of their dearest and closest. They suffered enormously, and today, after 20 years, somebody should destroy their country with a political decision. It's not logical. And I can understand why they are ready to fight for Bosnia and Herzegovina if necessary. But I would like to believe that the war is not possible in Bosnia anymore, and that international community would never allow that Bosnia split apart, or that any politician do it on the peaceful way. Of course, I believe that if somebody would start some idiotical war here, that the international community will be much more efficient than they were in 1991 when Yugoslavia was splitting apart. Unfortunately, all those people who had their own statement, who were moral, normal, enough courageous to tell publicly their statement, or to tell in their environment that they do not agree with the nationalistic ideas, ideology, and crimes which were committed in the name of some ethnic group. They are always considered as the traitors. And they always become somehow enemies of their own compatriots. And this is the price which those stalwart people always paid for their moral norms. Well, his ideas are not dead, and his ideas which unified Yugoslavia after the Second World War will be very, very important for all those societies today, in the sense of unifying, especially in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And that's why so many people appreciate the time of Yugoslavia when Tito was president. I think that it's nothing about reconstruction of Yugoslavia, it's just about the ideas which can unify, not divide and not destroy the countries. I know that it is true. I meet every day dozens of people who are saying the same. But I consider that as a nostalgia about the time in which they, in one word, lived the decent life. It's their word, decent life. It's a pity that people should recall 30 or 40 years ago as the better time for living for them than today. it's anachronical and illogical, but it is true. It's not hard to make a comparison between Yugoslavia 30 years ago and Bosnia today. Even Serbia today or Croatia today, although Croatia is in the European Union at the moment. But still, people are nostalgic, and they have all moral rights to be nostalgic. But something which I insist on is to try to make the life for them and their kids at least the same as it was before the war, and of course later even much more better. It is about, I think that it is about terminology. If it is one-party system, as it was in Yugoslavia, and if the one-party system is led by the party leadership called the dictator, then I can accept that Tito was dictator. I have nothing against. But you know, I lectured very often at American universities, so far over 50 American universities. And there were always somebody from former Yugoslavia who would, when the discussion started about was the Tito dictator or not, who would stood up telling, well, I would be very happy if America will have such kind of dictator as Tito was for us Yugoslavs. You know? Means people didn't consider him as a dictator in this negative connotation. And if it is just about the verbal articulation of this one-party system and the leader, then I can accept it. I'm a cardiologist by training, and I thought that it's enough for me to be a good doctor for my patients. I worked 20 years in Belgrade, in Medical Military Hospital in Belgrade, and then I resigned and moved to Sarajevo at the end of 1999, choosing another job to work, to educate the young people about civil courage. I think that in my family it was enough politics for maybe next 100 years. Why should I repeat something which is irrepeatable? Frankly, I think that my position, being out of any party, is much better, because in this case my voice can be heard by everybody. I will frame myself to one party which I will choose as mine, and in this case all others might be reluctant and might not like to listen to what I have to tell them. And that working in the NGO sector is much better to stay out of political parties, although I'm a leftist and everybody, I think, knows that. Of course, that the partisan movement and their great success by defeating Nazi and fascist in Yugoslavia was one among the best success. Then, of course, unifying the state and rebuilding the state destroyed by the Second World War, organizing, saying no to Stalin in 1948, organizing a non-aligned movement in this historical period was something which was very important. And I think that it is about his successes and about his failures. I don't know. It's clear that he was very old when he died, and although he organized the state to be run by the presidency, today, 20 years after Yugoslavia split apart, it is clear again that those people were not capable to run the country appropriately. I don't know, was it Tito's failure to choose or to estimate their capabilities and their sincerity or not? But maybe I can think about as his failure. To be proud of course. Sometimes it opened a possibility, and very often it caused a problem.
Why?
Because you know, I spent all my life proving that I'm the same as others, that I know the same as others. I was fighting for the best mark in my primary school, secondary school, at the university, and was forced to know more than my colleagues. So it's not something which is very easy when you are very young. Well, now, today, I know that it was good for me. But at that time, I complained, of course, very often. Of course, in those days, after Yugoslavia split apart, there are some people who were always the enemies of this regime, enemies of Tito, somebody who were losers or their parents were losers in the Second World War as members of different fascistic organizations in former Yugoslavia. And their successors does not like this surname at all. But it's their problem, not mine.